Well, I've only got little pensions.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time I pay my rent and
Mm-hmm.
all that, I just don't have any money left.
There's not a lot of money left over at the end of the month for Peggy Orn.
No, it just gets so expensive. I just had to, my daughter just had to take over for me because I just didn't have the funds to even eat.
She comes to Unison at Kerby Center to get her taxes done, but aside from that and some appointments, she doesn't get out that much. One of the reasons, she says, is the cost.
Because I don't know what to do with myself.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I do try to entertain myself, but
Mm-hmm.
you know, I do diamond dots and that kind of thing, you know, to keep myself busy.
Yeah.
And it keeps my brain active too.
Yeah.
And it's relaxing, so I don't mind doing that. Um, but that's about it. And I sit and watch TV. That's all I have. You know, I have friends that do get out and do things, and I have to say, no, I'm sorry, I just don't have the money, and they don't understand that.
For many seniors, financial strain is quietly leading to isolation, with rising expenses limiting the ability to stay connected. Programs like the ones at Unison at Kerby Center that remove financial barriers play a critical role. We spoke with Alex Bierman, a sociology professor at the University of Calgary, who's studying the link between financial strain and loneliness amongst seniors. He explains the deeper impact, how stigma around money, reduced social opportunities, and the feelings of not mattering can all contribute to loneliness. But there is hope, strong relationships, and low cost community programs that can help break the cycle. What are the connections then, I guess, between financial strain and loneliness amongst older adults?
Well, we find that financial strain is associated with a number of different outcomes that all are involved with loneliness. So, for example, we find that when older adults in Canada experience financial strain, they feel like they matter less to others in their lives. They also feel like they matter less to Canadian society as a whole. And one of the main ways we think that this is occurring, and we're currently studying the question of whether this is actually the way it occurs, is through stigma. What we generally know from prior research is that there's a large stigma to financial problems. People often feel like they're being judged when they experience financial problems. There's very much an ethic in society that you should pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. And if you're having financial problems, that's because of your own fault. Either you were lazy or you didn't plan well, or ultimately it can be nothing but your own fault. And so people often report that they feel like they're being judged by others when they experience financial problems. There's also multiple other reasons why financial strain would lead to loneliness. One of the most basic ones is that you don't have enough money to engage in a lot of social activities. Social activities often take money. It may not necessarily be the social activities themselves. You may need to expend money to get to the social activity. There may be ancillary costs, such as do you have clothes that you feel good enough for people to see you in? There's also other reasons why people may experience loneliness when they're experiencing financial problems. For example, due to a feeling like they'll be judged from others, they may be more reticent to be open about their financial problems and therefore not experience full and rewarding social relationships. In other words, there's just a number of mechanisms through which financial strain may create loneliness among older adults.
So is it contributing then to people not getting out of their homes?
You mean financial strain?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. In general, we generally do expect that financial strain will lead to a loss of social integration, less contact with the community, and less contact with the important people in people's lives because of the sense of shame, because people lack the resources to engage in social activities. Yeah, absolutely.
Do we know if that is something that's gotten worse over time? Because we always know that uh, income is always
obviously been disparity with income, but is this something that has become worse from your knowledge?
I don't know if this has been studied in terms of a trend. Quite frankly, I'm on the vanguard of really pointing out that loneliness isn't just a social issue; it's also an economic issue. So people have not been giving this broad attention. What I can tell you is this: we know that pretty much for at least the last 100 years within North American society, there is very much an emphasis on people needing to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, that it's considered that financial problems are your own fault. So generally, I would expect this to be a robust relationship across the last several decades at least.
Yeah, because this isn't something I could at least picture happening in a more agrarian society when, everyone lived on a farm
Mhm,
and everyone was kind of the same income. And that doesn't seem like it would be the problem that it is now.
mhm. I
With
mean, what we're really talking about here is capitalism. As capitalism has advanced into society, capitalism is about winners and losers. That is what it's always about. So when you're not financially successful, you're considered a loser, and that has a stigma to it.
Have you had a chance to talk to older Albertans or Canadians about this, how they feel?
Yes, absolutely. That's what we're doing right now. We have not published the research. We're still analyzing it. But on a preliminary basis, what we did was in January of 2026, we talked to older Albertans, a representative sample of older Albertans, over a series of days. And we started out just by saying, over the last several months, what have your finances been like? And then over the next 3 days, we just talked to people about what they'd experienced in that day. And this is, as I said, this is preliminary, but what we are finding is that when people reported that they had had financial strain, they did report more stigma associated with their finances, feeling like they were judged by others, feeling like they were less sufficient as individuals. So we are really tracking this. Previously, we've also found that when Canadian older adults experience an increase in financial strain, they do experience a decrease in self-esteem, and they do experience a decrease in feelings like they matter less to others in their lives.
This is what they're feeling. You said they're
Mhm,
feeling this stigma.
mhm,
Do we have any proof that people are being treated differently because
mm.
of their financial status?
Well, when we asked people and that daily survey, where we talked to older Albertans over a series of days, we did ask them questions like, did you feel today like you were looked down on because of your financial situation or treated differently? So there was definitely questions that we could ask older Albertans where, did you experience this behavior of being treated differently? Now, you're asking the $300 million question here, which is, can we externally validate those feelings? That's a much more difficult process across the social sciences because what you're essentially asking is, can we validate people's self-reports using others' reports? And that's a very difficult proposition. So we unfortunately have not been able to do that. And that would take a much more complex level of research than I think is commonly done in the social sciences today.
Yeah, so people aren't reporting that, person X said this to them. It just makes me think of that, if you can recall that Bruce
Yeah,
Hornsby and the Range song, that's just the way it is. And the
yeah,
man says, "Get a job." Do
yeah,
we hear things like that? Do we hear
well,
from seniors being told, like, come
yeah.
on,
Well,
get it
actually,
together?
we haven't tapped this data yet. So what I was talking about was those questions about how people felt, that they were treated, that stigma questions. But we haven't touched this data yet. We just There's only so many hours in the day, but we definitely do want to get to it. And what we did ask was, we talked to people to tell us about the three people they most had contact with each day. And then for each of those three people, we asked, how much, for example, did you feel respected specifically by this person? Or how much did you feel accepted by this person? So this is still feelings, but we're at least getting a little bit closer in that by saying, specifically when you interacted with this person, what was that experience like? And the next person. We also asked questions about a romantic partner with whom you may live. So we're still working through that data. It's very complex to do this, but these are questions we're starting to look at, absolutely, because it's the next stage, as you probably guess, which is, okay, now we know that financial strain appears to affect loneliness, it appears to affect people's sense of mattering, it appears to affect people's self-esteem. Why? What are the mechanisms behind that? Is what we're looking at next. Absolutely.
Yeah, and it also made me think that it's going to definitely reduce the number of things you can do. I have a person in my life, for example, she's divorced in later years, and she was on this dating website, but she's found this gentleman that she likes, but is reluctant to go out with him because he's not at the same income level, and then it would hinder her ability to travel. We think about these things in retirement that we want to do, and that could set up the stage for loneliness because they don't have that money to keep up with that other person they want to date potentially.
Yeah, exactly. That was what I was talking about previously. Yeah, because you still need money for social activities. Even if the social activity is free, you need to get to the activity. You need to, maintain a certain level of presentation. This is probably gendered, especially for women, and all of that requires funds. So that's another reason, absolutely, that we would expect there to be an increase in loneliness when people experience financial strain. Absolutely.
Okay, here's the other $300 million question. What do we do about this?
You know, it's a couple of different things. I think it's a societal issue and it's an interpersonal issue. And interpersonal basis, I think we really need to reach out to each other because, there is this fear that you will be judged when you experience financial problems. And I think right now we have to remember Canada is facing a historical level of financial challenges as a society as a whole. What I always say at this point is inflation doesn't go away. Even if inflation today is lower, that doesn't mean the increase in prices across food, across housing, now across gas that we've seen over the last few years went away. So a lot of people are dealing with a new wave of financial challenges that really their income has not kept up with. For older adults, they couldn't plan for something like this. So even if they save for retirement, even if they thought they were set for retirement, unfortunately, maybe looking at financial challenges they could not anticipate. And so I think on an interpersonal basis, we need to keep this in mind and reach out to each other and preemptorily, perhaps, and just say to each other, hey, you still matter in my life. It doesn't matter, we can't afford to go to the game or go out for a restaurant. And I think reaching out to each other and trying to maintain these social connections is absolutely essential. I think as a society, I think we need to take a step back and stop judging each other for these financial problems that we have to remember this is something society as a whole has faced. And it's not one person's mistake or one person's failure that's led to so many people experiencing new financial challenges. And, it's really interesting when I've published on this before for popular media, I do read the comments and I've seen so many comments of people saying, "Oh, it's their own faults. Why should we help other people?" You know what? We should help other people because this is what Canadian society is facing. And I think also on top of that, there's some movement right now to really actually support older adults financially less due to concern of younger adults. And I do not want to invalidate the concern about younger adults whatsoever. But at the same time, I think we need to remember older adults also deserve support, and pitting different age brackets against each other is definitely not a solution.
How important are then programs like low cost or no cost programs like the ones that you would find at a place like Unison at Kerby Center?
I think low or no cost programs are absolutely essential for the well-being of many older adults in Calgary specifically, but similar programs all across the country. I think we need these types of low or no cost programs because older adults today are definitely experiencing greater financial security than they did just a few years ago.
Anything else you want to touch on? No, no, just before I let you go, were the interview questions and whatnot you were referring to, is that referring to the upcoming study that is going to be released
Yeah,
later on?
absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah, we're
just
we're
wanted to
working on that
clarify
right
that.
now. It's a bunch of
Okay,
different. It's all, what you would do with social sciences is we take a
yeah,
survey and then we kind of cut different studies out of it. So, like for example, the stigma stuff, we have an abstract submitted. We don't know if we're going to get into it to the Gerontological Society of America conference, and then
right.
we'll develop a paper based on that. So yeah, it's all coming out. And so what I'm doing with the School of Public Policy is I'm kind of cutting much simpler stories out for the popular press and the popular audience. And then these more complex stories we're developing for the social science literature.
Well, I look forward to seeing that in its entirety. Is there anything else you want to touch on from that? I said that report that I was reading. I don't know
Um,
that
one
that
thing
came.
go ahead, sorry,
No,
please.
go ahead. One thing
One
you were
thing that
saying about
report
that.
showed that was kind of interesting was this. it's not necessarily that financial strain will lead to older adults feeling less lonely. Financial strain will lead to more lonely, sorry. Financial strain will lead to older adults to feel more lonely when they also feel like they matter less to others. And essentially, feeling like we matter to others is what's known as a buffer. Feeling like we matter to others can prevent the effects of financial strain on loneliness. So, something we can really do for ourselves is try to maintain quality relationships where we feel like we matter in the lives of others. And it doesn't have to be expensive. What's really important is a quality social interaction we have with the people around us. It doesn't necessarily even have to be a lot of people. Just feeling like we have these quality interactions where we matter to each other. That's often what can prevent this feeling of loneliness that can extend from financial strain.
Would volunteering be an example of that? Like you could really feel, I would think that you can matter. It doesn't cost you anything, and yet it could make you feel like you're contributing, like you matter. Would that be something that would help?
That absolutely could. It could just mean doing something like with your friends where you feel like
Mhm.
you're important to them, that they listen to you, that maybe that they depend on you in some way, even that's just emotional. All of this can be important. Now, something we want to do, something some of our other research on caregiving shows is that ultimately there is a cost if we give of ourselves a lot. So we want to do this in moderation. But otherwise, yeah, maintaining these sorts of relationships where we feel like we matter in the lives to others, be it emotionally, be it through instrumental support, that's something that can really prevent that effect of financial strain and loneliness among older adults.
I can see then that the financial part could almost be separate from them because I've seen it in my life that people, you feel like you matter less when your kids leave home. You
Mm-hmm,
matter less when you're not going to a daily job and you've retired. Those are two hits, I think, to making a person feel like they
mm-hmm,
matter less,
mm-hmm.
regardless of their income. Would that be correct?
Well, yeah, what you're talking about there is actually something a colleague of mine, Elena Fazio, studied, which is called role loss.
Mm.
That we lose these roles that matter to us, that can definitely be result in a loss of mattering. But what's important here is kind of what you said, which is if we can maintain some sort of roles in life where we matter to others. Next, this could be informally, just friends with ourselves. That kind of separates financial strain from that effective loneliness. It makes it less important. It actually atomizes financial strain by making it less relevant to our lives when we've got these strong social bonds.
Well said. Thank you very much.
So
Really
thank you.
appreciate again speaking to you about this.